Hello everyone, my name is Roya and today I'm coming to you with the books that I read in the latter half of November. There are a whopping 10 of them, so I'm going to be really fast in my explanations of each one. So firstly, we have the crack at the heart of everything. I already have a full review up of this. This is about a sorcerer and a warrior guy who fall in love and on a journey to break a curse. I had really high expectations for this book, and unfortunately it really disappointed me, mostly because nothing was explained. We got no character descriptions, no explanations of any of the things that are going on in the world and why or anything. So overall, I thought this book had a lot of potential, but it could have been so much better. The Elevated Communicator, this was my Works Book Club pick this month, and this one was very bare bones compared to the books that we've normally been reading. So it was really just describing different personality types. And then I read the last three books in the An Ember in the Ashes series. I actually read these because I started to read Air, which is the first book in her new series, and even though you don't have to have read An Ember in the Ashes series at all, it does actually spoil that one, so I just put that one down and started reading the rest of the first series. And I'm just someone who's really bad at finishing series, and a good part of why that is because a lot of times the first book is just all I needed. I'll read the first book in a series and feel like, okay, cool, I've seen that world, met those characters, that's all I needed. And I think this was also a series that was a lot like that. The rest of the series didn't do anything that the first one didn't already do. And since it wasn't like a total 5-star read for me, I didn't necessarily want more. I didn't really feel like I needed more of what I got out of the first one. The first one was kind of enough. I think the fourth one finally did pick up a little bit more. It got a lot better. For the second and third ones were kind of just, so like still 4-star reads, but not like super strong. They were just like perfectly good, but nothing like super duper profound about them. His Scandalous Lessons by Katrina Kendrick, which is a pen name for notorious SFF author Elizabeth May. This is about a woman who is a politician's daughter, and her father been basically wanting her to marry this old guy. Like ever since she was 12, she's been engaged to this like old guy, and with no consideration for what she wants at all. She's just totally a pawn, basically. And so she takes it upon herself to go and get this guy's help in finding her a husband. But of course she falls in love with him, and he falls in love with her, and shenanigans ensue. So this was really good. It was really intelligent. There was all kinds of just political intrigue going on here, and it was so well researched and really good, and I really enjoyed it. The Solstice's Bride by E.E. Hornberg. This is the kind of prequel short story to The Knight's Chosen. It follows the main character's mother meeting her father, all of that. So this was like a fantasy romance, but it was a short story. I thought it was a novella, but it was really short, actually. So, but it was really good, and I really liked it. Scorpica, this is an adult fantasy about the kingdom of warrior women, and this was definitely a book that I thought there was a lot missing from, mostly because it really read like it was like the setting was thought of, like the idea of this kingdom of all women came about before there was any actual plot, and it seemed like the plot was maybe built around that concept because the plot was super weak compared to just the overall idea. And I felt like as a result, we get very little explanation of why why we're necessarily following the people we're following, why the society functions the way that it functions. There's never really a reason given why the women, every time they have a son, they kind of have him just be adopted in another kingdom or whatever, because they just don't have any men in their entire kingdom and all of that. And then it felt like there just wasn't a whole lot of conflict. So like the biggest conflict is like, oh no, we're not having enough daughters for some reason. We have to go and steal perfectly willing young girls from other kingdoms. What shall we do? It's like, you know, every problem in the story was like super easily solved, and so it just lost me again and again. So perfectly good book, nothing terribly wrong with it. I just could not get into it for that reason. It was just, it could have used a lot more substance, more conflict, and all of that to it. Red Sonja consumed I read this because my best friend is a Red Sonja fan. I had never read any of the Red Sonja comics, but anyway, I saw this, I just had to read it. So this was a really good book, but I felt like for the first like half of the book almost, we see very little of Sonja. She's basically like just it kind of reminded me of this one James Bond book I read forever ago, where for whatever reason, the first 2/3 of the story are all just about like some of the bad guys. And James Bond doesn't show up until more than halfway through the book because we get this whole backstory first. This book was like that. Basically, we kept getting these long flashbacks or long, like, chapters where we're following another corner of the story and we don't know what the significance is yet, and we're kind of like, well, who is this person, who's that person, where's our main character, like what like significance does this even have? There was even one part where this chapter that follows another corner of the story went on for so long and covered like so much time that I thought we were getting a villain origin story or something. But it's literally just about a guy who gets killed by the thing that they ultimately end up fighting at the end. And I'm like, what was the point of that? We would have gotten like, oh, some people were killed anyway. So it didn't really have to be like this long chapter, you know, it just didn't make any sense. And so I liked this book, and I thought that it had some like witty stuff in it too. It kind of read like you're reading a comic book a little bit. Like there's a part where Sonja is about to like get mugged by some guy basically, and he doesn't know who she is, and she's like, oh well, why don't we introduce ourselves before you kill me? I'm Sonja the Red. And he's like, are you famous or something? Am I supposed to know who you are? And so there's like all this build up for him to not know who she is. Or like there's a part where she walks into a bar and she said, give me some beer. And they're like, well, we have lots of beers. And she's like, that's what I need, lots of beers. But they mean that they have lots of different types of beer. And so there are some really funny parts like that where I was like, oh my gosh, that's hilarious. And it kind of felt like reading a comic book. But ultimately, I thought that this book could have used a lot more, you know, sticking to the story and kind of making the story better rather than relying on a lot of flashbacks and a lot of just weird stuff that ultimately was like not important. And finally, Blood Over Brighthaven. This was so good. This is about basically this city where everyone who lives outside of the city is in danger and constantly getting hit by like some magic and getting flayed alive and all of that. But everyone within the city is like prospering and all that stuff. So basically the indigenous people who live outside of the city are trying to get in the city before something, you know, kills them. So But once they're in the city, the only things they can do is like the menial labor. They're not allowed to go to school or any of that stuff. So basically, we follow this lady who lives in the city, who is this prestigious mage, and she's like the first woman to ever be admitted to the highest level of mages. She's had to like crawl her way up there just because she's a woman. She's had to work twice as hard as anyone else. And then she meets this guy who is one of the indigenous people who once had to like run to the city or else die, basically. And she finds out they basically work together to do magic and such, and she finds out with his help that actually what's going on outside of the city is that, you know, every time they use the magic that the city runs on, it's taking basically people's lives and animals' lives and plants and everything from outside the city. So, but most of the people in the city don't know this. And so she has to go and try to tell, you know, the people, tell her colleagues about this. And it turns out that they all know and they just don't care. They've always known about this. And she's like horrified that these people she's looked up to don't, you know, don't care that all this human suffering is going on. That the very thing that they are doing is literally killing people in a really brutal, horrible way. And so it's just insane. Like, it's definitely a really good story. It's a really good premise. It's a really good story about a woman who starts off the story kind of only knowing about her own oppression and then finding out that other people are oppressed as well, and that what's really going on, and that she had prejudices that she didn't really know she had, and just how awful life is for a lot of people right under her nose when she didn't even know. And so the characters are really good. The whole plot is really good. And it was just a really good read. Just really unique and different and just like great. So anyway, so those are the books that I read in the latter half of November. Let me know if you've read any of these, have any thoughts on them, and I will see you very soon with a new video. Bye.